let's start talking a little bit about Rashi and his role in interpretation of the Torah, and also in crafting some kind of a hashkafa of a Jewish theology. So, in the modern Orthodox world, for most people, a more traditional Orthodox world, the word of Rashi is the word of God, in a way. So, meaning that they came to understand Rashi as the only authoritative interpretation of the text. Even though there are hundreds of commentators that argue with him in thousands of places, Rashi still is considered the most important commentator, and if Rashi says so, this is the meaning of the text. The ruling concept for many people is that Rashi is different than Midrash. And that is because in several places Rashi says there are several Midrashim, there are several Agadic interpretation on that verse, but I am only searching for a Midrash that agrees with the simple meaning of the text. That is what Rashi says. So a lot of people say that Rashi is not Midrash. Now, if you confront them with saying Rashi does quote Midrash and does it extensively, and I once calculated the ratio, before I actually measured it, I figured it to be somewhere around 85% of Rashi's commentary, and then I actually measured it by copying all Rashi on Bereshit, copy and paste, and then I move the text around into three categories. Midrash, anything that has its origin in the Midrash. Original commentary by Rashi, and technical commentary, meaning that's where he discusses usually grammar and syntax, or geography, or calculations of years and dates, which that don't fall into the interpretive. It's more technical.
So you're saying 85% of his commentary?
So 85% is Midrash, 5% is original, 10% is technical. Now, so what makes it so great? You would have thought, like, if someone creates an anthology, he's just an editor or collector, but he's not creative. So, in order to understand the importance of the commentary of Rashi, we have to understand his personality and character and historical context.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, the 85% that you said that is Midrash, is that all based on Rashi, or was that Midrash that he found from other people? And
he quotes earlier sources.
Oh, he quotes, so it's
definitely not his Midrash. No
opinion.
No.
Okay, so it's somebody else's.
It's all Midrash Rabbah, Midrash Tanhuma, the Talmud, the Mishnayot, all that. So now Rashi was at a very interesting junction in Jewish history, and that is where the world of Torah or yeshivot in Europe started flourishing, broke off from the connection to the Gaonic yeshivot, started establishing its own independent sources. He was a student of Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGolah, who worked and taught in Germany, in Mainz, and he went back to his native France and worked there. And he was the one who paved the way for people to study Talmud, because before Rashi, people were not able to study Talmud, definitely not in its entirety, because the Geonim in Bavel held the monopoly of teaching the Talmud. So if you wanted to learn anything from the Talmud, you had to send them a letter, and they will send you back an interpretation of whatever you asked. If you wanted to study the whole thing, you had to actually move to Babylonia and remain there and study the whole thing. Now, when you go back, yes, you have the knowledge, but in most cases, people who spent all that long time in Babylonia were indoctrinated. They felt part of the system, so they still maintained the connection to Babylonia. and its traditions. Rabbeinu Gershom Golas started breaking away from it by writing his own commentary. Rashi studied under him, and he wrote the first comprehensive commentary to the whole Talmud. He didn't cover the whole thing, but what really typified his commentary, that it was very clear and concise, and he had this uncanny ability to interweave the text of the Talmud with the commentary. So instead of, you didn't have to go back to the text to look for what he's saying, but you read as one fluid text. He quotes, and you can read the quotes in the text as one continuous text, which is a really unique ability of Rashi. And besides being a scholar that writing this commentary on the Talmud made it accessible for others, for his students and his grandchildren, the Tosafot, he also, as a person, was really a very caring and devoted leader to his people. And you could see his personality shine through his commentary. Meaning Rashi was really a leader of was a very high status stature in terms of the ability to not only care about power and knowledge, but also about how his community is doing. And his community is not just the community, a shul or a synagogue or yeshiva, but the greater community of northern France and even Germany. So he deals with problems, tries to solve people's problems, and the problems are, what are the problems? They're not only your regular halachic problems, such as questions of Shabbat and kosher and monetary issues, because they had a lot of financial dealings with Jews and non-Jews, and he had to deal with it, but also theological problems and community problems, such as the status of women, such as the spirit of the community under this heavy attack of Christian animosity. Remember that Rashi passed away when the First Crusades started, 1096. Yes? So Rashi, even though he didn't experience the Crusades, but the atmosphere that preceded them was definitely there. All the tension in Germany, the animosity towards Jews, the demonization of the Jews, and people felt overwhelmed. But on one hand, they want to get as far from Christianity as possible. On the other hand, it's like a love-hate relationship. There's this secret admiration for Christianity, because here's this powerful religion. It's strong. It controls the whole world, all of the known world. It's Germany, it's France, parts of Spain, Italy, parts of the Byzantine Empire was under Christianity, even though it was the Eastern Christian Empire, parts of Israel, back and forth. And you are the exiled Jew. You have no status. You have no state of your own. It's very difficult to live in a reality like that. Some people even developed kind of an admiration to martyrdom, and this is a very strong element in Ashkenazi literature. The idea of sacrificing your life for God's sake or for God's name. So usually we know it from the Crusades, where people committed suicide or killed their own children. We know it from people who defied the non-Jews and were willing to die to sanctify God's name. But there were also rare cases of people that, there's one case at least of a rabbi in England, a young scholar in England in the 1200s, who committed suicide by hanging himself on something that looks like a cross. And it's as if he wanted to show Christians that we could also do that. Oh, you think you're so great that you were willing to do that? We could also sacrifice our life without any external persecutor in God's name. This, what I'm telling you now is part of research that has been developed in the last 30, 40 years in Israel. Sort of like uh, deviated from this halo of the devout Jew in Europe was willing to do anything for God, but showing that there was a deep Christian influence. The reason that people were pushed towards martyrdom is because they had to show that they could also do as the Christians do. So all these things are now things that Rashi has to deal with, and he has to deliver the message to his community, and he was able to do that. So, as I said, first we have this great scholar who writes the commentary on the Talmud. We have a very devoted leader to his community, and he's very involved. He knows exactly what people are going through, and he cares about them. He is also engaged in dialogue with Christian thinkers, like many other commentators in Europe at the time, many other scholars. They were in touch with the Christian commentators, for the simple reason that when you're an intellectual, you need someone to talk to, and they didn't have that many people. The Jewish community was mostly learned and literate, but they didn't have anyone to talk to outside their world. So when they had a local Christian scholar, then he is the ideal person to talk to. You go over and...
How do we know this?
We know that because research was conducted. There's a book by Beryl Smalley called, I think we call Biblical Commentary in the Middle Ages. My sister also did work on that, on Maimonides, and there were specific, and Sarah Kamin wrote a book on Rashi, showing that the school of Saint Victor in France, U of Saint Victor, the relationship are clearly established. I did some more research on that, and I'm still developing it on. And I found sort of code words that whenever Rashi wants to refer to a certain Christian ideology or Christian commentary that he wants to reject, he uses code words, and it's the same code words all over his commentary. I'm still work in progress, but it's pretty systematic. So it shows that Rashi knew what the non-Jews are saying, and he had to provide a solution for the people, how to deal with it. So that's the other element, the important element of his commentary. And finally, just like in the Talmud, his mastery is in taking all these different midrashim, and he borrows from different sources, and merge them into one coherent commentary. Usually not too verbose, not too convoluted. You could just read through Rashi's commentary, and you feel like, if you read the Hebrew, you feel like you're reading a story. Even though sometimes he deviates, he digresses to discuss chronology and math and geography and language, but then you go back to the storyline. Now, there is a dispute, or we really don't know how long did it take Rashi to write his commentary. Some scholars throughout the ages, because the Rashi got this status of a sacred text, said that, made an exaggerated statement saying that Rashi set or counted 7 clean days, just like before going to the mikveh, for every drop of ink that came out of his quill. Just like you go to the mikveh for every drop of blood. That's the analogy. The problem is that if he really had to spend 7 days for every drop of ink, probably never go beyond the first chapter of Bereshit with his commentaries. It's an exaggeration, but they meant that it's sort of like holy text. I personally, we don't have no evidence. It doesn't say anywhere I started on that month and I finished on that month, as we have in other manuscripts. I personally think that Rashi wrote this commentary in one sitting. Maybe it took him 2 or 3 months, but meaning it's he every day or night when he had time, he would sit down and continue writing. And it's not that much. And when you isolate just the commentary from the text, of course, after he learned it, so maybe he edited certain sections that were more complicated, but the bulk of the commentary was written in just one one fell swoop, as people say, and it has this fluidity. You could read through it. So what did he do? In merging the Midrashim, many scholars of Rashi believe that he actually weighed out the options and said, oh, there is this version, and I want to choose this one to use here and use this one to not use, and so on. Nehama Leibovich wrote extensively on that, and her books are available in English. She's a very important commentator on Tanakh and on Rashi's commentary. I personally believe, and maybe there are others who believe the same way, that Rashi's choice of which Midrashim to quote and where and how to quote them was not conscious. It was subconscious. Meaning, after years of learning the material and having obviously some kind of genius, both in memory and interpretation, when he came to write it down, it was a new midrashic process. So, in a way, to answer your question, Stephanie, he did use previous material, but the way he presented is original. No one before him presented the material the way he did, and that's the secret of his appeal to people. You could feel his passion coming through. You could feel his voice coming through. For example, when Rachel tells Jacob, "I want to have children. Give me children, or I'll die," and he says, "Am I God who prevented you from having children?" Rashi says, God told him, "Is this the way to talk to a woman in distress?" Meaning he identifies with Rachel. And in other places, you could see that as well. But in general, this is how I think Rashi wrote his commentary. We have no proof either way. The problem is that throughout the ages, an attitude has developed of, you don't question Rashi, this is how it is. And it's a problem because kids are being taught Rashi in school, and it's presented them as the authoritative commentary, right? And also teachers feel that they must teach everything that's written in Rashi. They don't know where to skip and what to dwell on. So they run into strange situations. So we'll choose some of the midrashim that are quoted here. We're not going to do all of them. We're going to look at the first one for sure. This is important because it's the first commentary on Bereshit by Rashi. So if you now you're a student of Torah and you were told that Rashi is the most important commentary, and you open your Humash and you read the first commentary on the Torah, it must be very important because that's your gateway into the Torah. It must tell you more than just what the first verse is. It's sort of an introduction to the whole commentary. So what does Rashi say? Lily, do you want to read that?
Sure.
Anyone else, if you want to read, just I know that.
In English or in Hebrew?
In Hebrew.
Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, lo haya tzarich להתחיל את התורה אלא מהקודש הזה לכם, שהיא מצווה ראשונה שנצטוו. ישראל ומה טעם פתח בבראשית, שאם יאמרו אומות העולם לישראל לסתים אותם, שחיפשתם ארצות שבעה גויים, הם אומרים להם כל הארץ של הקדוש ברוך הוא בראה ונתנה לאשר ישר בעיניו, ברצונו נתנה להם וברצונו נטילה מהם ונתנה להם.
Okay.
Rabbi Yitzchak said, the Torah should have started in Exodus 12:2, which discusses the first commandment given to the Israelites. Why then did it start with the story of creation? It was done in order to refute the arguments of the nation who might claim that the Israelites stole the land from them. The stories of Genesis demonstrate that God created the world and distributed the land to nations in accordance with their actions.
Okay, so this is the first Rashi on Bereshit. The first thing that you see when you start your study of Torah. What do you deduce from it? Like what do you learn from it? Comments like what do you take from it?
That a foundation is necessary.
In-
Well, that he's saying that you can't just start in Exodus because we do need that foundation.
Okay, so we need the
God
foundation.
promised.
Okay. What else?
Well, it's certainly an argument for chosenness, and I mean, it sounds a little elitist.
Is it the chosen people or chosen land or both?
Both. I mean,
Okay.
it sounds a little elitist to me.
To nations in accordance with their actions.
Yeah, I mean, it would make me feel a little bit more special than I probably should, or something like that.
Okay, so it's uplifting, you would say?
Sure, yeah, but in like a propaganda kind of way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's almost Zionist,
Okay.
even though the term is anachronistic. But
Not so much. You know, people would say back then, okay, so it's Zionist. Okay.
because it expresses certainly a connection.
Did we use this argument when we came back to Israel? Yes.
Yeah.
We're still using it now. We're still using it now. Is it a good thing that we use it now?
It's not received well.
It's
Depends
not.
on who you
But
ask.
the people
What?
who challenge don't
Depends who you ask.
don't accept any answer well.
What?
So he said the people who don't like we had it way back when don't like any answer well.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that if we say we lived here before, that's one thing. We have a connection to the land. Even though, and I think this is really, by the way, what keeps us in Israel more than anything else. The fact that we are, and I can tell you that as an Israeli, and I'm going back to visit, taking missions, and telling them story about the Tanakh, the reason that people cling to Israel with such force is that we have the stories of the Tanakh, we have our history, that when we went back to the land, it's not just a colony that we conquered. Somewhere along the line, the new roots and the old roots that are underground reconnected. So you all of a sudden feel connected to a 3,000 years history. So it's very hard to move that. That's one narrative. The other narrative, which is a problem, is when you say God gave us the land. It's good as an internal argument for within the Jewish people. It's okay to say that. Not okay to say that outside. You know why? Like why I would say that? And nothing is provable. The other side says, I don't believe in your God. But worse than that, the other side says, my God gave me that land. And then you add religious tension to the existing political tension. But then you're right, this is a Zionist argument. It's definitely when the Zionist women wanted to come back to Israel and they called it Zionism, it's because Eretz Israel is called Zion. This is the idea. So they're all great things, great ideas that we okay, so now what else can you tell me in terms of the context, historical context? Now we spoke of Rashi as the author, even though this original text comes from the Midrash, from maybe 2nd, 3rd century. So what can you say about the original historical context and the context of
Well, the Jews had no sovereignty.
Jews had no sovereignty when the Midrash was created, right? When Rabbi Yitzhak says the Midrash,
It could be either way when it was created and when
right? But who controls the land at the time?
of Rashi,
Yeah,
Muslim.
the Muslim control the land, and then the Crusaders are going to go and take it from them,
Right.
and the Jews,
Neither are the Jews.
right?
Neither of those parties are Jews.
Right,
So
and the Jews have to sit and do nothing,
and hope they
and
don't
just see
get
the
falsely
right.
accused of something.
Right. So, in a way, Rashi sends a message also to his community, saying, right now, I mean, it's like Lily said, it is uplifting because we are God's people, we are the chosen people, and he says, we cannot fight for the land. We don't have the military prowess to do that. God will take it. God will give it to the ones who deserve it. And our way to get the land is by doing God's will. This is a message that is sort of a subliminal message that you find here. This message will reappear later on in the story of Moshe killing the taskmaster. Right? How do you, which is not in this text, but how do you assume that Moshe killed the taskmaster? What did he use? It's not in the text, but it's in the movie.
No, he wouldn't have used
What would he use?
Wouldn't he bludgeon him or something?
Could be.
I thought he just used
His hands.
His hands? He's a prince. Don't forget, Moshe comes out of the palace.
Sword?
I assume that he has some kind of weapon, right? Okay, could have been a whip, but he killed him with a weapon. Does anyone remember what Rashi says, how he killed him? No? Okay. By using God's name. Moshe uttered God's name, just like we read in the Midrash about Bilam, that Bilam was using God's name to do some kind of practical Kabbalah or wizardry. Moshe uses God's name and kills the Egyptian. Now, this seems to have a text proof. It has a proof text. It's when the Israelites confront Moshe, when he wants to break the fight, and he says, "Hal orgeni ata omer." Are you trying to kill me? But the literal translation, are you saying to kill me? But that's a form of speech in Hebrew. Just like you say in English, I'm going to eat, even though you're sitting and you're eating, right? I mean, I'm planning to eat. So it's the same thing in Hebrew. I'm saying to eat means I'm planning to. So there's no proof in the text to say that really Moshe used the holy name to kill the Egyptian. Why is Rashi saying it? Because the Jews in the diaspora have no military, have no weapons. The only weapon that they have is God's name.
Words, yeah.
His words.
Well, that's a stretch.
It's not a stretch. Why is it a stretch? Why would you use it? I mean, it's a stretch.
How would Moses have not
The Midrash is a stretch, or my interpretation of the Midrash?
No, not your interpretation.
Oh.
The Midrash itself.
Yeah, but nobody.
He had met Hashem.
Right. That's a good point. He hasn't met. Okay, I didn't think of that one. See, that's a good.
Of course, the Torah doesn't.
No. It has. That rule. You mean that?
I'm trying. I am.
No. It's a very good point. This is what we have to do. You just add another element, right? Moshe could not have used Hashem's name because he doesn't know him yet. At least not in that level of intimacy, because he must have known about his Jewish roots from Yocheved and Miriam, but maybe not with such depth. But when you say about chronology, the Torah is not in chronological order. That's not, people use it too freely in the Orthodox world.
Right.
Whenever there's a problem, the Torah doesn't care about chronology. The Torah cares very much about chronology. It's only in those specific places where there's a clear discrepancy between the events and the Torah, there will be one opinion that says, En mukdam muhar Torah. In this case, the things were shuffled around, but you have to say why. It can be shuffled around just whimsically. It has to be for a good reason. Now, but I see with all that, I see a serious problem with this commentary, and which I wrote here. The premise presented here is that the Torah is a book of laws, and that the narrative parts of it are not essential. When you say the Torah could have started on the 12th chapter of Exodus, you're actually saying, I don't need the Sefer Bereshit in the first 11 chapters of Exodus. They're superfluous. I could have done away with them. And Nahmanides does pick on that and attacks Rashi and says, how can you say that this is not important? How can you say that this is the only message? We're talking about creation. We're talking about the life of the forefathers and so on and so forth. So Rashi does answer his question. But the problem is, in my opinion, that the impression of the question still lingers. When you read the text and you Rashi and you say the Torah should have started there. Wow! So really the Torah is only about laws. Even though the question was answered, that we had to teach this ideological concept that God chooses the people and chooses the land. But without that answer, the question would have been valid, right? That ideally the Torah should not include anything about the laws. And that pulls the rug from under the feet of...
Right, the Torah should not include?
Should not include histories and stories. I mean, we found an argument to keep this one in. All that Rashi provided was, why do I need this part of the Torah to teach me the question of ownership and entitlement to the land? But if I wouldn't have that argument, yes, then do away with it. So, believe it or not, I found I forgot which volume years ago, in a periodical called Tradition, I think published by YU or OU, an article by a rabbi who tried to show that there are laws in Bereshit. And he looks at the issues like Gidan Hashem, the sciatic nerve, that we're not allowed to eat, and some practices of burial and of marriage. And I thought it was ridiculous because you are taking the premise that was rejected and you stayed there of we have to look for laws in Bereshit, otherwise why write the book? And so it's not, I'm not saying that I'm arguing with Rashi. I'm just saying that as educators, when we deal with this question, we have to bring them to the open and say, we have to understand that the Torah is not a book of laws. We learn more, I think, from the narrative that we learn from the laws. Yeah.
And the narratives serve they have to serve our identity.
Yes.
Our identity.
And the narrative also allows for some flexibility, which the laws...
But, sorry, I'm a little confused though. Are you saying that Rashi has a legalistic perspective on this?
No. Rashi, I'm just giving the example of how sanctifying Rashi's commentary could be a problem. When Rashi used this Midrash, he didn't think about probably the other implications of it. He just wanted to speak about the idea of being chosen and the idea of being entitled to the land. But now, after it was written, later commentators come and talk about that, and eventually we end up with this kind of concept that the Torah is all about laws. So here's the question, interesting question that commentators ask, and for the most part they tend to say no, and that is, if Rashi had a chance to rewrite his commentary, would he do so? So most commentators would say no. Most Orthodox thinkers would say definitely no. Rashi is holy. Each word was counted and measured and so on. The problem is that we have a testimony from his grandson, Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir, one of his three great...
that's
Rashbam. The Rashbam says, "Harbe pe'amim nitvakachti lefanav." In many occasions we were arguing about the meaning of the text. V'hoda lefanai, and he admitted, she'im haya lo pnai, if he had time, היה צריך לעשות פירוש חדש, פירושים חדשים. He would have to write new commentaries לפי הפשטות המתחדשים בכל יום, according to the insights that are innovated each day. Not each month, every day. She says, if I had time, I would sit and write no commentary לפי הפשטות המתחדשים בכל יום. Every day there's something new to write. So that I think enforces my theory that Rashi wrote it in between things and just finished it. Never had time to fully revisit his commentary. It wasn't the main thing that he wanted to do.
I've heard also from other, like Rabbi Feinstein has taught this, that you can start your story in different places.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if this is, the Rashi might have brought this that, where do you start your story? Do you start your story with the nation,
Mm-hmm.
right, at Sinai, or do you start your
story in a more global way.
Yes.
And what would then be the implications politically,
Right.
socially, for
Right.
each of those options?
Right, so that's a way to interpret the interpretation of Rashi, which is legitimate. But the thing to have in mind is for educators, so when they look at the commentary, and if you keep reading through it, I explained really the dispute between the church and the people, especially if you look at the page 2 here. I wrote about the compromise of Augustine of Hippo, according to which the church should not annihilate the Jews, but rather let them live in misery as a testament to their sins. According to this theory, the Jews would either dwindle and disappear, or barely survive until the second return of Jesus, when they will finally convert to Christianity. This I wrote on page 2, it's like second paragraph. He based it on a verse in Psalms, Al tahargem benishkehu ami. Do not kill them, do not kill the Jews, lest the nation, the Christians, will forget. So the Jews were then in that position where they have to prove to themselves and others that they are the chosen people. So the Midrash for Rashi to choose was perfect. I'm not questioning his choice. For him, it's the perfect Midrash to choose because people are questioning their status as the chosen people. Why are we in the Gola? And he says we have sinned. That's why we're here. But eventually, when we return to God, we will also return to our land. Okay. Fine. So let's go to the other to another commentary here of Rashi, and that is on page 9 here, in the middle, on verse 1, chapter 1, verse 2. So this refers to the pasuk Veruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the world, the heavens and the earth. Ve'haaretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the land was in a state of chaos. Veruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim, and the Spirit of God hovers over the abyss. So Rashi explains, Kisei hakavod omed ba'avir. ומרחף על פני המים ברוח פיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא ובמאמרו. The Spirit of God hovers. The divine throne is suspended midair, hovering over the water by the breath of God's mouth and by His utterance. So this is how Rashi views the concept of Ruach Elohim, merachefet al penei hamayim. The Spirit of God hovers over the water. So we have the water here, and let's say this is the divine throne is hovering over the water, and it's suspended. Like what makes it hover there is God's word. God's word have this suspended over the water. So. What do you think of that commentary in terms of the pasuk? How would you, when you look at the text and it says there was chaos, the choshech al penei tehom, and darkness over the abyss, and the Spirit of God hovers over the water? How would you look at the pasuk? What is it you see there? Let's see if you had to visualize it. What do you see there? Do you see the throne hovering there?
I mean, it just doesn't add up with I mean, it's very theatrical.
Yes.
But
Well, it says Ruach Elohim. So I wouldn't envision
A throne.
a throne.
Right.
In fact, I wouldn't even envision. I'd be careful to envision anything.
Yes.
Actually.
yeah,
So that's why I think that I don't even think it's a manifestation.
Okay.
God, it's something.
What is it? What is the throne of God? How? Because we speak about it a lot, especially in Safut, Chalot, in the early Kabbalah, we have the idea of the throne, or the Merkava, the chariot, which is mentioned in Ezekiel. The Kisei is also mentioned in Ezekiel, as well as a lot of visual descriptions of God and the animals and the angels, right? So how do we understand that? And you're right about this being more visual, and part of the European theology, which Maimonides and before him Rav Saadia Gaon attacked, was the cause of anthropomorphism, of attributing physical dimensions to God. And the problem was solved by Maimonides and by Rav Saadia before him by saying that these are all metaphors. When the Torah speaks about God's hands or eyes or ears or heart, or God's getting angry or upset or regrets, etc., they're all metaphors. They're all Dibra Torah Kilshon Bnei Adam. The Torah speaks the vernacular, and it brings it closer to our understanding. The early Kabbalists, when you speak of early Kabbalists, it's like Safrut Chalot, and later on the European rabbis, the Ashkenaz rabbi like Rashi and his school, believed in a new concept called Kavod, Kavod Hashem, the glory of God, or the Shekhinah, or Kisei Kavod. They're all sort of mediators between us and God. So it's some kind of a compromise of how can you have something anthropomorphic or with a physical shape, yet we say that God doesn't have any physical shape. So it's not God, it's rather the Kavod, sort of an angel or an extension or manifestation that God creates in order to communicate with us.
I mean, on something more, I suppose, positive.
Yes.
And you get by defining it as a Kisei HaKavod.
Yes.
There's a sense of sovereignty.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, again,
right. The throne is the seat of the king. Right.
It's the seat of the king.
Yes.
So it's definitely recognizing God's sovereignty, literally over the earth,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to any other king. And again, this is written in a time.
Right. So that will be perfect. If Kisei HaKavod just shows God's sovereignty, that I think would be a very very appropriate commentary. Then we'll have to ask, why do we have to use the imagery of God's throne as hovering over the water? And why I say it's good imagery, I think it's an appropriate interpretation, because we have this, like V'ha'aretz Hayta Tohu Vavohu, which we usually translate. What is Tohu Vavohu? Chaos. Right. Nice Greek word, right? But in Hebrew, we don't know what Tohu Vavohu is. It's really perplexing. It seems to convey a state of confusion. Tohu, tohe, is to wonder or to be perplexed, and vohu is gaze. Like you look around, disoriented, you don't know where you're going. V'hoshech al pnei tehom. So this is darkness. Hoshech al pnei tehom. Tehom is the abyss. And then we have a Ruach Elohim. We have to look at the pasuk to understand the complexity here. Ruach Elohim merhevet al pnei hamayim. And God's wind or spirit hovers over the water, right? So up to this point, up to the Ruach Elohim, what is the general atmosphere that is conveyed by the verse? Is it one of disorganization,
And
darkness, which for us
very negative,
negative,
scary,
right? Fear, abyss, the unknown. So it's unknown, it's scary, it's dangerous. We don't know what is going to happen next. So it's great fear. Now, if you only look at the last part of the pasuk, the Spirit of God hovers over the water. What does this convey? If you don't know the first part, just the second part, the Spirit of God hovers over the water. What kind of feeling? Like emotional, hopeful, and safe, right? It's tranquility. It's diametrically opposed. The two halves of this paragraph. So we have an interesting word here, tehom, that when the field of studies of the ancient Near East started developing, and the literature of the Babylonian, of the Akkadians, etc., was discovered, then we found some things about their mythology, and the word tehom is features in their mythology prominently. It has a very important role. Tehom is the Hebrew form of the name of the goddess of the abyss, which is called in the Utnapishtim Tiamat. Right? Right. You start with?
Sweeney.
Great. So Tehom is Tiamat. It's interesting also because it has to do with Teom too, and Maim in Hebrew is plural. But on that, we know also that the sea monsters are also part of the Babylonian mythology, and they're mentioned later on in Isaiah and in Tehillim in association with the myth of creation. So, biblical criticism says here you see the influence of Babylonian mythology over the biblical literature. We could say, I could say, Mesopotamian, yes, Babylonian, but previously Sumerian, yes. So Mesopotamian is just the term for the land where Babel is. It means between the rivers. Meso is middle. Potamia is the word potable, drinkable. The other way to look at it is, and that's, by the way, that's the approach of Professor Cassuto, an Italian Bible scholar, who's the first one to tackle the documentary theory and trying to defend the integrity of the Torah. He says the Torah is well aware of those mythologies, and this is its way to handle them by giving it to the people with a twist. You take the original story, the original mythology that they're familiar with, and you give it a different end. So whereas in the original story, the creation is a battle between Marduk, the chief god, and Marduk or Marduk, right? Mordechai.
It's my name.
Yeshua Mordechai.
It's Mordechai. It's not Yeshua.
Okay. Oh, I thought. Okay. So there's a battle. It's a noisy, scary, bloody battle between the god and the monsters Tiamat. Here, it starts with darkness, abyss, tohu, but it ends off very quietly. Unlike the myth, here it ends this total control. God controls everything with quietness, with stillness. So this is the original concept, and in that sense, what you said, Josh, about the Midrash, we definitely have it here, because the.
See, I even have other questions when you look at it this way.
Okay. Yes.
The first question I have is what Mayim, right? Al Pnei Hamayim.
Yeah.
There's no mention of Mayim previously.
You're
Where
right.
did that come from?
Right. So that it will be always a question like what came first, what was created, right?
Or maybe it's assumed because of Tehom.
That we don't know. That in the beginning, something is already there. Yeah, but this is like biblical.
Yeah, you could start with this and you could get into it and keep going.
Yes, I like to say, when we study Bible and science, that I personally accept all scientific theories of how the world came into being. As a believer, I believe that God directed it, so it's fine, and we could balance it. But the thing is, with the one area when science and Torah sort of agree, is that there's a limit to our knowledge. Right? With the Torah, we'll ask the question about the text. So, was the water? Did we have water? Did we have the abyss, darkness? It doesn't matter, because Torah doesn't really describe creation as it was, because it was way beyond the level of comprehension of people in antiquity. Even if Moshe was somehow exposed to this divine knowledge that was downloaded directly into his brain, when he comes to the people coming down from Mount Sinai, imagine, with the 2 tablets of the law, if he would have told them, as the beginning of the book of Bereshit, he would start talking about the Big Bang and wormholes and the expansion of galaxies and the cosmic forces, and so they would stone him to death. You're crazy? Dinosaurs, even today, people would be stoned for that. So instead, the Torah tells it in a certain way, and it leaves us with the message of, you don't know really how it worked. The main thing for you to know is that God created the world, and God revealed Himself to you and gave you a certain code of behavior. This is what you need to know. What science tells us, which is fascinating, is every time science could step one, it'll take us a little further in the past, right? But at a certain point, science will have to say, okay, we don't know what was before that. And when you find out what was before that, you will ask, and what was before that? It's infinite, because we would never get there. So the Big Bang sort of solved the question of how the galaxies came into being, but where did matter come from? Right? And then you have the Higgs boson and other things that explain how this matter came into being, but where did that come from? So there's a physicist, Alan Guth, who spoke about that, who found out a way to prove that there is a way of creating something ex nihilo, something out of nothing, by distorting the space-time continuum. One atom could become the nothingness could create one atom. He had the mathematical proof of that. And I read the interview with him, and I remember the interviewer asked him, so what does it mean, what are the implications of your discovery regarding creation? Because sort of they could prove, your theory could prove that God is not needed. Right? The world came into being out of nothingness. So Guth answered, he said, all I said was that according to the laws of physics, the creation of something out of nothing is possible. The question still remains, who created the laws of physics? So there will always be something before that. Anyway, this is when we talk about how we understand the pasuk. But in the sense of how we will look at this Midrash, like you said, it could definitely fit with the whole idea of Kisei Kavod just shows God's sovereignty over the water, over the world. But we could have said, Rashi could have said, Kisei Kavod merahef al penei hamayim. That Ruach Elohim is the Kisei Kavod, Ruach Elohim is the throne, and it itself hovers over the water. And so in the first paragraph here, I mentioned a couple of textual problems, but we'll skip from it to this version of the Midrash that Rashi built on. Remember that I said that Rashi takes the Midrashim and works with them as he feels necessary. So it says, "Hamayim ayu olim umagiim lechisei hakavod, kedichtiv ruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim, kenesher." The waters were rising up, almost touching the divine throne, as it is written, "The Spirit of God hovers on the waters like an eagle." I translated waters in plural because I want to preserve the sense of water here as a plural entity. So the Midrash clearly identified the Spirit of God with the throne, but does not include any other acting forces in the scene. So Rashi did something here. The Midrash says, Ruach Elohim merachefet, the Spirit is the throne. Rashi throws in another element. The throne is suspended by the power of God's Spirit. So here, look at the second paragraph on page 9, and here is the question: why did Rashi use the midrashic source to compose such a difficult commentary? Right? Even the Hebrew doesn't work. The Kisei HaKavod hovers in the air, and it's hanging by the Spirit of God and by His utterance. Right? So the most probable is the suggestion of Professor Elazar Twito, who is a scholar of Rashi, who actually wrote the book called the text I wrote before, Hapshatot HaMitHachim B'chol Yom. It says that Rashi wanted to reject the Christian interpretation that the Spirit of God is the Holy Ghost. The Christian interpretation was able to use another Midrash, Ruach Elokim Ze Rucho Shel Mashiach. The Midrash uses, when the original Midrash was written, they probably did not refer to Jesus as the Mashiach, or maybe they did. I mean, if it was a devout non-Christian, then he just said what he was trying to say when he said Ruach Elohim hovers over the water. It's the Spirit of Mashiach. He was trying to say that the potential for redemption is there already from the time of creation. Or it could have been that it was originally created by a Christian scholar, meaning a Jew who believed in Jesus as the Mashiach, but was able to pretend that he is this traditional Jew, and was able to somehow insert his commentary into the Midrash. In any case, Rashi did not want to leave room for this interpretation. He doesn't want us to think that the Spirit of God is the Spirit of Mashiach, because he now writes and lives almost 1,000 years after the original commentary. And when the original commentary was written, people did not yet identify Jesus with the Mashiach. But in Rashi's time, their identification is almost complete. Right? Like if you say today, Messiah, in a non-Jewish environment, who would people think of? They would think of Jesus. The Greek word for Jesus is Christos.
Oh, the Greek word for Christ is Christ.
Yes, so it's Christos.
The Greek word for Jesus, I think, is just Jesus, right?
Yeah.
That is Greek.
Yeshua, probably, yeah. What is Christos? What does it mean? Messiah, which means anointed.
Yeah, no.
Like we say the word to Christian is to anoint. The word Mashiach is from the word Mashach in Hebrew, which is to anoint with oil. So this identification exists, and it's very powerful already. In Rashi's time, he wants to deviate from it. So he uses the Midrash. He takes the other Midrash that says Ruach Elohim Ze Rucho Shel Mashiach, merges it with the other one that speaks about the throne, which is the same thing, and creates a third version of his own, where the throne hovers in the air, suspended by the Spirit of God. This way he negates the possibility of anyone interpreting the word Ruach Elohim as referring to the Spirit of God as the Mashiach, as representing Christianity. Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
On page 9,
yes.
Say Kanesher, like an eagle. Is that from the Midrash? That part?
Yes, that's from the Midrash. I just give the end of Midrash to know how it continues. This refers to a verse in the end of Devarim.
Yeah, it's funny about the concept of Merachefet.
Yeah. When I wrote it should be Marhefet.
No, but the only bird that can actually hover
Is it?
is a hummingbird.
Oh, really? It's true. Yeah.
The other birds just keep moving forward.
Yes. No, but the hummingbird is not. It does not hover. It keeps flipping its wings in a very, very, very high velocity.
But it appears to hover. It could stay.
It appears to
could
hover,
stay
right?
In a single place.
Yeah. No. When they say merahef hover, it's actually what we call gliding. When you see like an eagle gliding, or
it's not flapping its wings.
it's just like that. It's amazing, and it's written in the Torah in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 11. Kenesher is like the way God protects His nation is like an eagle hovering over his fledglings. Yifros knafav yikaheu Yisrael alevrato. 1 second. Look at the one out of the Midrash. I didn't put it there, but it became like a classic Midrash because it's the conclusion is 4 words, and those 4 words became sort of a mantra for many Orthodox leaders. And this is regarding the encounter of Esav and Yaakov. When
Stone neck.
yes. So stone neck is one part of it. So Esav runs towards Yaakov and hugs and kisses him, right? So the rabbis of the Midrash were perplexed by that encounter because we already know that Esav and Yaakov don't get along that well. So one commentary says that he was, and they cry. So one commentary says, like Eric says, that he was about to bite him. He wanted to kill him, actually. It's the first vampire. And at the moment he did that, Yaakov's neck turned into a stone, which means that he continued breathing, miraculously. It's very hard when you're... it's just the outside.
Which
Wait, it's not there. I'm just telling you.
I'm going to try to find it.
What, chapter?
It's the beginning of Vayishla, Parashat Vayishla.
Is it Genesis?
It's Bereshit. No. It's we'll look at it more in depth tomorrow. But the other commentary says, no, it just had a change of heart. Usually he hated Yaakov, but at that moment nichmeru hamav alav. He felt this. He was overcome by passion, by love, right? So
Don't they say it's a kiss?
What?
I don't know if it was this one, but it wasn't a bite, it was a kiss.
No, so according to the second commentary, it was a kiss. He really kissed him. But the way that the Midrash phrases the term, the introduction, that really he hated him, it says halacha, Esav, soneh leYaakov. How come he kissed him? It's a halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. And on that, so much was written by rabbis who said, you know what? The animosity of the non-Jews towards us is not something that changes with time and ages. It's a halacha. It's a law. The law doesn't change. The animosity doesn't change. So it didn't give us much wiggle room in terms of our relationship with the non-Jews. But I'll send you the text and we'll work on it tomorrow. God willing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is a. Even today,
they are supposed to hate us.
They will always hate us. You will always be hated because you're a Jew. You have no choice. And you know why it's good to use this tool? Because this way it keeps you in check. But the great it keeps people in check because you don't want to assimilate with the Goyim because they hate you. They're going to come back at you with vengeance. The problem is that when it's not happening, you lose the power of that deterrent. So in America, a lot of people have been waiting for this to happen. I'm reading Orthodox literature, and every time that something happens, you see, everybody's going to turn against us. In the previous elections, the Orthodox literature and they wrote in Yiddish because they didn't want to, openly say that you're not allowed to vote for this one or that one. But every little thing that happens, you have those prophets of doom and say, you see, we told you it's going to end, the Jews, and you must leave America, nothing is going, you have to run, find the next country. So that was the method of propaganda that is, we see a hand of it in this commentary of Rashi.